So, Ken, Pulte is a business executive. He's a staunch Trump ally. Does he have any experience for this role as acting DNI?
Another day, Anna, another jaw-dropping announcement from Donald Trump. No intel experience that we're aware of or that is apparent from his resume. He's 38 years old. As you said, he's been involved in making criminal referrals about mortgage fraud regarding some of Donald Trump's political foes, including Representative Adam Schiff and Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York. And in the Truth Social post announcing this appointment, Donald Trump said he didn't reference any intelligence experience. He said that William has deep experience managing the most sensitive matters in America, the safety and soundness of markets. I don't know what to say to that. There is a provision in the law that requires the Director of National Intelligence to have significant intelligence experience. A lot of Democrats believe that Tulsi Gabbard didn't qualify for that, but at least Tulsi Gabbard had been a military officer, had some foreign affairs experience. You know, this was a post that was created after 9/11, an office designed to connect the dots, to stitch together the various strands of intelligence. It has really fallen out of grace, particularly in the Trump administration. There are people now that think that it should be disbanded, essentially. The CIA is playing the primary role in both gathering and analyzing and pulling together intelligence in the Trump administration. And now you have Donald Trump appointing this person with not only no intelligence experience, no apparent foreign policy experience to this role in the acting capacity. It's just another strange day in the Trump administration.
I think that's why we are all asking why, Jake. What went into this decision behind the scenes there at the White House, and why have him do two jobs?
Yeah, I mean, to echo Ken there, what we can't say definitively is really point to any expertise in terms of national intelligence that Pulte may have. What we can say confidently is Bill Pulte has positioned himself as someone who is an incredibly loyal individual to Donald Trump, which we know in this administration carries significant weight. Look, he was chairing he was head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, nothing to do with national intelligence, but repeatedly, Pulte, throughout Trump's second administration, has very publicly pushed for the prosecution of some of Trump's enemies. One of those most famously was Letitia James. He did that from the Oval Office months back. Officials say that Pulte has positioned himself in a way that he talks with Trump regularly. He's someone that has very privately and publicly been incredibly loyal to President Trump. This is also someone who officials say has sometimes angered folks within the Justice Department because of how publicly he has pushed for the weaponization of political enemies of President Trump, despite any really routine evidence being clearly stated there. So this is something that what we don't know at the moment is this a plan for the president to eventually move him to appoint him to a full-time position? Of course, that'll be incredibly difficult for him to get that confirmation necessary. But this is something that the president, in the meantime, it seems believes is going to help him get the information he wants quicker from within the government. And to your question, too, I'll just add about having him, serve as the head of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, while also national intelligence, necessarily hasn't stopped Trump and other pieces of his administration. Marco Rubio, as we know, actively holding 3 roles right now. So It's unclear the foolproof strategy of President Trump right now. But this is someone who is loyal to Trump. We know how much weight that carries in this administration.
That's right. And Rob, as Ken mentioned, Tulsi Gabbard was already a controversial pick in this role. And now Trump has chosen someone who is at the center of his effort to use executive power to target his perceived political adversaries. Is that going to rebuild confidence within the intelligence community?
No, not at all. The people who've been working it for decades and their entire lives. And you see someone come in that has absolutely zero experience. As Ken said, Tulsi wasn't even really considered qualified for the job, but she was a military officer. She had time on the Hill, and that's important because ODNI is coordinating over 18 different agencies, over 100,000 people involved in it. The people who run those agencies are still going to be the experts. And the people on the Hill are going to go to those people and not him because they know. But I think what you saw down in Georgia when Tulsi Gabbard was at a criminal search warrant for voting information from Fulton County showed that she was willing to do certain things. And I think the loyalty is the biggest thing. And why you have someone doing 2 jobs is you can't find enough loyal people that will do anything to fill them. I think that's why Mark Rubio is doing 3, and now he's going to be doing 2. it takes confidence out of the ODNI position. I think it is a position that doesn't need to be there any longer. It was a offshoot from 9/11, and him filling it just kind of shows that it really isn't a position that anyone needs to be in that has any experience.
Well, we know also this is a president who likes to have acting whatever, right? The big roles filled by acting folks because they don't need confirmation, and it gives him a little bit more room, I guess, to sort of do as he will. Rebecca, Pulte took this relatively low-profile role as the director of the Federal Housing Agency and turned it into this notorious sort of position by targeting Lisa Cook and Adam Schiff and Letitia James with these mortgage fraud investigations. And now to put him in charge of the entire U.S. intel apparatus, does that raise any concerns for you about how he'll wield this power?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I mean, politicization is dangerous from multiple perspectives, and it always threatens in a certain way the expertise that comes out of the agency and also faith in whatever fact-finding. And in this particular context, I think that's especially concerning because national security is at stake and also democratic principles, because somebody in this position, if they were to truly wield their power, could ultimately direct national intelligence against political enemies, essentially, sort of targeting groups within the United States that are dissenters, and that, obviously threatens basic democratic values about dissent and the value of, people being able to speak out against the particular government. And I don't know whether that's part of the purpose of this appointment, but it's certainly a concern one would have if he actually, managed to gain control over this vast mechanism.
And this timing, of course, is all interesting. Any reaction there on the Hill, Michael, from Republicans? Would he have any support to be confirmed in this role permanently?
We haven't heard anything yet, Anna. Obviously, this is still a developing story. Folks are still funneling into the building. But certainly if President Trump tries to install Bill Pulte in a permanent position in a permanent way for Director of National Intelligence, he could face an uphill battle. That's because you're certainly not going to get any Democratic support, given the fierce pushback we saw to those mortgage fraud referrals, also the fact that he hasn't served in an intelligence position. But you could also face some issues with Republicans. The first stop that his nomination would be the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's made up of 9 Republicans and 8 Democrats, which means that if just one Republican votes against advancing his nomination, that could block him from advancing. And you have 2 Republicans that I'll be keeping a close eye on that panel. Susan Collins, the moderate Republican from Maine, who is, of course, no stranger to breaking from President Trump. She doesn't ever shy away from criticizing him. And then you also have John Cornyn, who's sort of now untethered from the political atmosphere and the political pressures that come as being a Republican up on Capitol Hill, given he just lost his primary, did not get President Trump's endorsement. Cornyn is also on the Senate Intelligence Committee, so we'll certainly be looking for those 2, in addition to others, to see how they feel about this nomination. Because, again, if President Trump were to push Bill Pulte in a permanent capacity, he would first have to face the Intelligence Committee. Susan Collins and John Cornyn could hold this up.
Right. He's already facing a lot of pushback on Capitol Hill over another issue. And I can't help but wonder if this is to detract from that other issue involving his nearly $1.8 billion DOJ settlement fund. And Jake, we're learning that the administration is dropping the plan for this fund. Is it gone for good?
Yeah, Anna, it's a good question, because what we do know is that the president has been privately behind the scenes looking to potentially drop this fund for the past few days now, even though it was only announced by the Department of Justice a couple of weeks ago. This is something Trump knew was going to be wildly unpopular, and to be clear, was wildly unpopular, even amongst congressional Republicans who pushed back privately and publicly. This is something that also top Trump aides, according to White House officials that spoke to my colleague Jackie Alamany, say was not something that they could get behind. This was something really tough to defend publicly. To the question of, is it gone for good? I think there's a little devil in the details there that's still unclear, because whenever we reach out to the White House to clarify, is this dead altogether, this weaponization fund to the tune of $1.8 billion, they point us to the Department of Justice's statement that came out yesterday, where they clarify that they disagree with that district judge's court ruling, but say instead they're going to adhere to the court. That court hearing date is going to be on June 12th. And so if the White House plans to fight the courts here, that's something that's still unclear. But what we're being told at this moment from White House officials is, for now, the weaponization fund is dead. But that for now is really key.
Yeah, and Rebecca, we don't really know at this point what it means for the other part of this settlement deal, which was this immunity from any ongoing tax audits for Trump and his family and his businesses. So we're still working on the reporting on that. But how do you see this? Because there was the revived court proceedings over this whole IRS lawsuit to begin with and how this settlement fund came to be. Will any of that legally proceed?
You know, it's quite confusing because in a certain way, this is sort of extra legal. It's outside of the legal system because it doesn't adhere to our normal expectations of how a settlement ought to function, how a court case ought to function. We don't normally have, you know, a party, essentially Donald Trump, suing his own DOJ for having done something back when he controlled the Department of Justice. Very confusing. So when you have what you have is courts trying to apply their normal processes to an abnormal situation, which makes it any kind of prediction sort of difficult. But it seems to me like these cases will probably proceed because there hasn't been any official action that undermines the case in front of them.
So a judge could decide to see it through and ultimately determine whether there was ethical or other types of violations?
They could, unless there's some kind of more official dropping of the case. I mean, essentially, what the government has said is so unclear that they're adhering to that. Well, of course, one normally adheres to a court's decision. So what does that mean? If that means you're actually, dropping your position, well, that is something different. And I'm not exactly sure how that would procedurally go forward, but that's not exactly what they said. They just said they're adhering. So if you adhere to a court decision, then the court simply moves forward with what's going on. If you're adhering and you're no longer contesting, then that's a different story. But the language is vague here, and it's a little bit hard to figure out what that means from a legal perspective.